And hello again. This is Jim Dawkins with Living Sacrifice Ministries. We are entering into our fourth study of the Ten Commandments. When I first taught these lessons, this series, it was to a small group study a little less than a year ago, I believe. I made a statement at that point that I've since found was probably not entirely correct or accurate, and that was that the Second Commandment, the one we'll be looking into today, was probably the most confusing and controversial of the 10. And while there is some confusion surrounding it with a lot of people, not only then, but even now, I found that we can find every bit as much with any of the others that we'll be looking into in future lessons, and we'll be seeing that. And the reason I stated that at the time was over the word idol, and exactly what an idol might be. Keep in mind the idols that the people of that time were familiar with were literally man-made idols that had been carved out of wood and stone, formed out of melted and metals and things like that. For example, I could take this zebra. I could worship it or the animal that it represents. And things like that were commonplace then. Ironically, when Moses was on the mountain getting the tablets that would contain the Ten Commandments from God, something exactly like that was taking place. Aaron, his brother, and the children of Israel were down at the base of the mountain, taking the gold off the bodies, their jewelry, and making a golden calf an idol. No, it was not a striped zebra like I have. It was a golden calf. So we saw it right there. If we look first at the very simplicity of the commandment, or at least at its foundational statement, the beginning of it, it statements that we have no graven images or idols that we worship. The example would be something like that golden calf, my zebra, a wooden pig, whatever. On the surface, this looks rather simple and straightforward. I don't build or create something and bow down and worship it. It gets a little bit tougher when we start looking at things that would then be a representation of God himself. There are people in churches even today who will have a statue or a painting of Jesus or of someone from church history and bow down to it or kiss it. You'll see even over my head, a picture of Jesus bowing his head down. Okay, and yes, there are other works of art in my home. I have these again as something more than pieces of art. I don't bow down to that and pray to it. I don't kiss it. I don't show it reverence. I simply have it as a piece of beautiful artwork. It was interesting when I was in Vatican City some 35 years ago. There's a huge marble statue of Peter outside the cathedral, and it has been there for centuries. People are of the belief that to walk by this and simply rub your hand on it, and it's up on a pedestal high enough that you can basically just touch its foot. Touch his feet, you will receive a blessing by this venerated Saint Peter. It has been touched by so many people, but the rubbing and the body acids of so many people rubbing and touching have literally worn down the foot of this marble statue. So we have to be careful in realizing that we're not only talking about a calf, about a dragon, about an animal, but even venerating images of people who we would even reverence as being good, godly men and women in our own Bible, in our own church. Now, to look at the commandment more in its entirety, if we read Exodus chapter 20, as all the commandments are found beginning in verse 3, it says, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall which is pretty clear. Okay, you shall make of yourselves you shall not make for yourselves an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above, no likeness of anything in heaven, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, and showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments." Now, I want to straighten something out for a lot of people, because we notice here in verse 5, he says, "I am a jealous God." Most of us have been taught in our lives not to be jealous, that jealousy is a bad thing. By and large, it is, because we find ourselves normally being jealous because you have something, I don't, I'm jealous. That is actually more of a being covetous, me coveting something you have, and I'm jealous of you because you have it, I don't. It could be a toy when I'm a child. It could be a better job or a car. It could be the prettier girlfriend or wife. It could be better behaved children, whatever it may be. Okay, this is not the kind of jealousy that God is saying he has. What he is talking about being jealous is, I am jealous because you are my children. I am deserving of all of your love. I am jealous if you give that love to someone else, or if they think they deserve the love that is owed to me. This is the same kind of jealousy that a husband should have toward someone desiring his wife, or if his wife starts looking toward another man, or the other way around, a wife and a husband. So keep in mind there is justifiable jealousy, and this is what he's talking about here. Now, one reason that this was a key matter for the children of Israel was not only the obviously stated points that God was, in fact, their true God, and he wanted to make sure that they were not worshiping false gods, but and that he was a jealous one, not wanting to be lost to them. Because the same holds true for us now. We are not to be making idols. We're not to be worshiping false gods now, and we're going to touch on that now, how it even is applying to us, where we may not be building and creating false idols in the way that people may have been tempted to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. But when we look at the children of Israel as they wandered there in the desert, let's keep in mind where they'd come from. Now, they came from 400 years of captivity in Egypt. And with the Egyptian religious practice, while not practiced by the children of Israel, was, as we read, it was, and this is quoting Wikipedia here, is the Egyptians believed that the phenomena of nature were divine forces in and of themselves. These deified forces included the elements, animal characteristics, or abstract forces. The Egyptians believed in a pantheon of gods, which were involved in all aspects of nature and human society. The religious practices were efforts to sustain and placate these phenomena and turn them to human advantage. This polytheistic system was very complex, as some deities were believed to exist in many different manifestations, and some had multiple mythological roles. Conversely, many natural forces, such as the sun, were associated with multiple deities. End quote. So we have to see here. We had an Egyptian culture with many, many multiple gods. We had Ra, the sun god, being one. Okay, they worshipped a god of the sun, a god of the sea or the water, a god for different plants and animals. Even when we look at the gods, it's hard sometimes to cross over which were mythical creatures, which were gods, where they crossed over. And they often had attributes that carried on many different things that would now be explained in nature. And for 400 years, the Jewish nation had been subject to this. Now, they'd been seeing this, and they'd been hearing this, and while, for the most part, they did not practice it, imagine yourself, for your entire life, and your parents and grandparents and their parents and grandparents' lives, being inundated with the culture, the belief system of a society that was just reeking of this. And so, for 400 years, the entire Jewish society had been living under the rule of a people who were saying these idols that they built and worshipped and prayed to that were part animal, or that represented the sun, that represented this rock, that represented this item or that item, were real. And so, when we look and we see that when we have over 2 million people, over 2 million Israelites leaving, finally, yes, God had still chosen them and had held them back to teach them the truth during this whole time. In the back of their minds, the whole time they've been polluted with a society telling them otherwise. The reason I point this out is this. Many people have asked why it took God 40 years to get the children of Israel from Egypt to Canaan. There were roughly 2 million people there. We don't know exactly. We do know this. There were 600,000, roughly 600,000 Israelite men, plus the women and children, and plus their slaves, and any sojourners, any strangers or travelers who were with them. And this we read in Exodus 12, verses 37 and 38. They also had all of the livestock. So we don't know exactly how many people they had. It's estimated, if you figure with the men and, like I said, their families and their servants and whatnot, it would have come out to about 2 million people, plus the animals. Okay, that's a heavy load to carry. But here's the interesting thing. The distance they were traveling is only about 100 kilometers. Or, for those of us who don't use the metric system very well, about 62 miles. The average person would walk that in about 20 hours. Now, of course, you're going to have infants, babies, toddlers, older people, people who are crippled, can't walk at all. You're not going to do that in 20 hours. You're also not going to do it straight. You're also not going to do it. But it's also not going to be a 40-year trip. So why? Now, I have heard it suggested, and must agree, although the Bible does not tell us this emphatically, and I'm paraphrasing a very wise pastor It says, it took 400 years for Egypt to get into the people of Israel. It took 40 years for God to get Egypt out of the children of Israel. Think about something in your life that's polluted it. It might be a bad habit. It could be a behavior of yours. Maybe you smoke, maybe you drink, maybe you use foul language, maybe you have an addiction of some kind, maybe there's just something that you'd like to really change in your life. And you say, well, I've been doing it for so many years. Well, you're not going to wake up tomorrow morning and say it's just going to be stopping. God may need to work a process through you. God saw generations and generations and generations of these people. He said, even if I'm going to work with you, it's going to take time to work with you. And if we even look at the 40 years he had them, it did. They slipped, they fell. What happened? They got out of Egypt, crossed the Red Sea, and immediately started murmuring to Moses and saying, okay, now you brought us out here to die? And he almost had a mutiny on his hands. They were ungrateful almost right away, and constantly, and over. So it took 40 years. And even then, what happened? With the exception of 2 of the adults who got out, none of them actually made it to the promised land. Kind of amazing. So yes, one of those things was the acceptance of idols. They had seen those idols. They had dealt with them. The Bible doesn't tell us how many of those people had actually been born Jewish and then maybe intermarried or fallen prey to it or had doubts. We don't know. We don't have a lot of the details of what was happening with every single intimate family, every single relationship. But I do know this. One of those things was the acceptance of the idols that they had had. I mean, we figure if they were there for 400 years, and even in the lives of the people who left with Moses, at a certain time, at a certain point, and this is simply my speculation based on what I've seen in tolerance in my own life and in looking at history, not only in the Bible but elsewhere, a certain amount of tolerance and I just want to be left alone to live the life I want sets in. Even as a Christian, living in a society that is falling further and further away, there comes a point where I'm looking and saying, okay, I will reach those who want to be reached, but I'm not going to fight against those who don't want it. Which means, to a point, a tolerance of what I would see as being immoral behavior or things that I don't believe to be correct, religions that go against what God teaches, and so forth and so on. I wonder how much of that was happening in the very lives of the children of Israel, to where they said, you know, we've been slaves in this country for longer than any of us have been alive, and it's only getting worse, or there's no end in sight. Yes, we know God says He's going to deliver us someday, but I'll just go on living my life as a Jew here and leave them alone. Meanwhile, allowing the poison of what was outside them to seep into their lives. Our society's accepted many things in recent years that it didn't in the past. Even in my own life, I've seen changes that I've become more and more accepting of things that 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago would never have been allowed. Now, while we do need to be a society that tolerates things to the point that people are making their own decisions and their own free will has not been taken from them, when it gets to the point that immorality is now the norm, and those who stand up for what is right are viewed as being the closed-minded, irrational ones, we have a problem, and we've gotten there. And our society has gotten there now. But we have gotten to a point here where we still see idols the way they were being viewed then, an idol being that item. But what we have created here in this society is a society of idols all our own, and a society that seems to be okay with it. Now, I want you to ask yourself these questions. Now, this is not a way to make you feel guilty, and it's not a way to say that you have to give up everything that you enjoy or every form of fun and pleasure, or to dedicate every waking moment to prayer and Bible reading and this and that, because for that matter, you can give so much of that that you've made that an idol and you're not balancing your life. I mean, I have, for example, right here in front of me, a Bible that my parents gave me for my birthday in 1984. Okay? If I made this too much of my idol because it meant more to me than the substance of what's in it, well, I have an idol in that book, not in the words in it. But ask yourself a few questions here, and then if you're not comfortable with the way you answer them, it may be time to reevaluate how you're defining what an idol is. First, have you ever decided, or do you regularly decide, whether or not you're going to attend church on Sunday? By what time, say, the big game comes on TV, or what time a particular Sunday afternoon picnic or event starts. So, well, gee, I have this I could do on Sunday instead, so no, I won't go to church. Or do you say, I wish I could do that, but church takes my priority? Do you ever have enough money to buy all of your toys, your electronic toys, pay for your hobbies, your vacations, the habits, if you're single, you're dating, but not enough to give to God's work? Now, I'm not saying that you need to be giving half your money to missions and to the church, things like that. But if you have money for all of these things, but not a single penny to give to church. And I'm not going to sit here and give you a lecture on how much money needs to go to church or what the Bible says about tithing, but for the people I know who always have the latest in new gadgets, but have never given anything to church because they can't afford to. And here's one that I find interesting too. Are some of your favorite activities those which, if found out by some of those at church, you'd be ashamed to have confront? Somebody come to you and say, I saw you coming out the door of such and such a business. Now, the reason I ask these things is because if these are the things that have become most important to you, and I'm not saying you have to be sin-free in your life, but if any of these have become the things that have become most important to you, you may have a very different kind of idol in your life. Okay, something that's taken onto your heart. It's now taking your time, your money, And quite honestly, I've been there. For me, for over 20 years, that idol for me was my job. And it came before anything else, even my family. And my wife will even tell you that. And the interesting thing is, I felt that I could justify it, because after all, the work I'm doing, at least now, is ministry work. And so I figure, well, I'm working for the Lord, so it's all good, it's fine. When in fact, although I was reaching people, and people were thanking me and giving me high praises for it, I was working for me, because I really enjoyed hearing people say that. My job was my God. The praise I got from other people was it touching and affecting people? Were people hearing more about the Lord from it? Yes, because this is where God had asked me to go. This is what God had asked me to do. But was I continuing to put even more than He asked me to into it? Yes, because I was getting something out of it for me, and I did that for me first. My first priority was to serve God, then, or rather should have been to serve God, and then to be a partner to my wife, as it should be for everybody. Any ministry you do after that, even if it's for the church, volunteer work for somebody, things like that has to come next. And it seemed noble, what I was doing. I even had my phone next to the bed, a pastor from somewhere else. I get calls from pastors all around the world, or from somebody in a Bible study group, or from church. Well, I'm right there. And my wife started getting very upset. Let's face it, I live in California. I work with pastors throughout Africa and Pakistan and India and around the world. Phone rings. It can be all different hours, and it would be upsetting that the phone would ring different hours. She would get upset because I was dealing with their needs, and I'm thinking, this is my job. I have to do this. It's important. No, I was feeling important for me. But then I was too tired to be her partner and actually serve the way I should later, because I had made my self-righteousness my God. So ask yourself, have you ever been caught in a trap like this? It may not be even a ministry job, but a job where you're being praised because you're making top sales on the job. And you're thinking, well, of course, I'm doing right for my family. I'm making good money. I'm providing for them. You're a police officer or a military man, but I'm protecting the community. And on and on. These things can happen, and we can all find ourselves doing the right thing for the wrong reason, and making things out to where we have made something else a God. And ultimately, in that sense, we have to look and say, well, have I then made myself God? And am I making myself proud of what I'm doing? Because then you really are not living for God at all, and you are not humbly doing it. But then again, that could be an entire sermon series on itself. We will be going on with this series from here, getting all 10 commandments. And I hope you've been enjoying what we have so far. Please feel free to leave comments here, or email me at lsministries121@gmail.com. So if you found that you have an idol in your life that's hindering you, this would be the time to give it up. And with that, let's close in prayer. Dear Father, we thank you for this opportunity we've had to come together, and pray that you would watch over us and give us an opportunity to take what we've learned here today, that any idols that we have allowed to to trap us, to take place where you should be, would be set in a place with that we would know that you are the only one and true God, that we are here to serve you, and that you have given us all we have and all we need. In Jesus' name, amen.